Feel free to turn to the person next to you and just say good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Do you like the new setup? Do you not like it? Do you like it? If you like it, nod. If you do not like it, then not no. Okay, okay, got it. Kim doesn't like it. That's okay. And our friends Scott and his wife are back from their trip. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to see you. Okay, today we're going to be studying John chapter 1. Before we get into it, we're going to be talking a little bit about evangelism and why it just bothers us so much. This morning I woke up, and I'm not going to lie, I said this is a particularly bad morning, and then I remembered that we lost an hour, and so I drank a lot of coffee this morning, so I'm a little fuzzy. We don't like evangelism. And one of the reasons why is because it can feel awkward. If you survey people, you say, why don't you share your faith with people? The number one answer they'll give is fear of rejection. The number two answer they'll give is they'll say, I feel like they'll ask me a question and I won't have the answer. I remember one time I was sharing the gospel in Wally, and we decided we're going to meet people's needs and then also tell them about Christ. And so we took socks and we stuck Bibles in the socks, mini Bibles, tiny Bible. And we saw on the side of the road there was a man who was begging. So we said to him, "Do you need some socks?" He said, "Yeah." So we gave him some socks through our car window as we were about to drive on the intersection. And then we start to drive as the light turns green. And I feel on my face, I said, like this on the side of my face. I said, what was that? I looked down. The guy had taken the socks with the Bible in it and thrown it through the window because he was so upset that we would dare to try to sneak in a Bible with his socks, right? So this is like, when you ask what's the worst that can happen, that's like a 2 out of 10, right? Some people all across the world, they go to prison, they get killed, right? So it's not that bad. But there's always this kind of fear. If you survey people that are not Christian, you ask them, why don't you accept Christ? The number one answer that they will give is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. And you know what? I think if we're really honest with ourselves, there's a part of us that doesn't share our faith because of specifically hypocrisy. There are times when we feel like, man, if I was a better representative, then it would be like I could share the faith and my character would shine through and people would be able to see Christ through my character. But there are times when you wake up and it's daylight savings and you've had less than 5 hours of sleep, you're grumpy, you're tired, you snap at somebody, and then all of a sudden now you almost regret, I wish I didn't tell that person about Christ because they heard it from me. There was a diplomat from the country of Georgia, and in 97 he went to the States, and diplomats have this thing called diplomatic immunity. So if a representative of another country shows up in Canada or in the US, if they commit a crime, they can't be prosecuted for that crime in this country. So people will, diplomats will just go nuts. They'll park anywhere they want and they get a parking ticket and they just go diplomatic immunity and they don't have to pay the fine. And so this guy from Georgia, he's living life recklessly and he drinks a whole bunch and he crashes his car into three cars. One of them had a 16-year-old girl in it. 16-year-old girl passes away. The Georgian president, again, the Georgian president sent this man to America to represent Georgia, the country. And what does he do? He kills a 16-year-old drinking and driving. He's so ashamed that he says, you know what? We're going to waive diplomatic immunity, throw him in prison. And this man has to go to prison where usually what would happen is you become persona non grata. They would kick you out and you can go back to your country. And the president was so ashamed when he said, just stay over there. And there are times when it can feel like God has saved me. He's sent me for this mission. He says, go into the world, preach the gospel to all nations. And still, there's a part of me that feels like I'm a bad representative. If you know the things that I've done, if you've seen my heart, you know the things that I think about, the things that I've said in the past, the things that I've done, the sins that I've committed. If you knew that, yeah, you wouldn't want me as a representative. You'd be ashamed of me. You wouldn't want me to be representing the country of Georgia. Same thing can be true of Christ. And so we're going to study today, how do we solve this problem where we feel ashamed of the things we've done and therefore we feel like Look, man, that's on somebody else, but it's not my job to be the representative of Georgia because I'm not a very good one. So that's what we're going to study today. All right, John chapter 1 and verse 34 says this. Sorry, 40. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard that John had said, who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah, that is the Christ." And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which, when translated, is Peter. So I know we don't go through a lot of verses at a time, and very, very soon we'll have a little sermon series. We'll go for a month and we'll pick some other book. So maybe we'll have a vote in the group chat. Feel free to let me know if you want to be added to the group chat. So this chapter, first thing we find out, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Let's find out a little bit about Andrew. Andrew was, it says the first thing he did was go and get his brother and say, "We found the Messiah." The last thing Andrew ever did, he was crucified in Greece on an X-shaped cross. He was crucified for 2 days before he died. And the entire time for 2 days, guess what he did? He told people about Christ. The first thing Andrew ever did, he told people about Christ. The last thing Andrew ever did, he told people about Christ. His whole life was about telling people about Christ. God prepares people. Andrew is going to get his brother. His brother, Peter. Peter, by the way, that's the guy who wrote 1st and 2nd Peter. That's the guy that the Catholics say he's the first pope. That's the man who Jesus says, "Your name is Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." So he becomes the foundation of the church. He's one of the most famous men that ever lived, Peter. Andrew is called to get his brother, and his brother is prepared. God prepares people. There was a man named Adoniram Judson in the 1800s. He showed up on the shore of Myanmar to the Karen people. And the Karen people, they had this prophecy. They saw this man get off this boat holding this book. And they came over to him, they grabbed the book and they said, "Translate this book for us." The Bible. "Translate this book for us. We need to read it. God sent you with this book." And so he translates it for them into their language. Hundreds of thousands of Karen people become Christian. He says, "Why were you so vigorous to grab this book and read it and believe it? Why did you say that?" He said, they said, the elders, they said, "There's been a prophecy handed down for hundreds of years from our fathers and our fathers and our fathers." They said a man with pale skin would come onto our shores holding a book, and the book would be sent from the creator of the universe. And this book would show us how to know him. And that's why hundreds of thousands of people in Myanmar became Christian. Isn't that incredible? God prepared those people to receive what Adoniram Judson had to share. Does he not do the same? Like, there's a part of you that feels awkward if you feel prompted to share your faith with your barber, with somebody at work, with somebody at school. But that only happens if we think it's our job, if we think it's we're the one doing the work. But what if God is preparing people's hearts all the time? What if the people at work, he's bringing them through certain situations, he's preparing them. Many people in Iran, in North Africa, in Afghanistan, they see dreams of a man in white named Isa, Jesus. And then somebody shows up a couple days later and they say, "Oh, I want to tell you about Isa." And then they go to church, and the fastest growing church in the world right now is in Iran, which is like a closed country. You're literally not allowed to evangelize in Iran, and it's the fastest growing church in the world. Isn't that amazing? God prepares people. He's the one who does evangelism, but he decides to make you the voice. A lot of times, you're the last step in somebody's journey. God has been bringing them through certain situations, relationships, jobs, troubles, and you're just the last little piece. And he prompts you, go and share it, go and share it. And a lot of times we hold back. We feel like a hypocrite. We feel scared of rejection, whatever it happens to be. John chapter 6 says, "No man can come to Christ unless the Father who sent Christ draws him." God is drawing people to himself. It's important to remember when it comes to evangelism, God draws people to himself. God is drawing Peter. God is drawing Andrew. He says, here we go. He says this, we found the Messiah. Messiah means anointed one. The reason why he's called the anointed one, Jesus, is because there's three jobs that Jesus has. So in Israel, when you have a new king, you anoint the king. You take oil on your finger, you put the oil on somebody's head, and you say, now you are called to be the king. If there's a prophet, they would put oil on the prophet's head. They say, now you're called to be a prophet. If there was a priest, they put oil on the man's head, say, now you're called to be a priest. God anoints people for different works. And sometimes literally. It's really obvious who's supposed to be king when the entire country of Israel gathers around and the priest takes the oil on his finger and touches his head. It's like the Lion King, Simba, it's really obvious who's meant to be king, yeah? It's obvious what the priest's job is. It's obvious who's going to be a prophet when he's anointed. And the reality is sometimes God anoints us for different works. I'm maybe not a king, right? But he anoints us for different works, and sometimes he makes it real clear what we're supposed to be doing, and we ignore it. My brother, he was born deaf. My brother's the one playing cello today. He was born deaf. They looked at the graphs. They say he's completely deaf, completely. The elders from the church, they came, they put oil on their fingers, and they touched his forehead. And they did a scan the next week. They said, it's a miracle. We don't know how it happened, but he can hear. He can hear. One side, one ear is completely healed. He's the guy playing cello today. I mean, he was born into a musical family. He's the most musical guy in here. Today, at 9 o'clock, we're here setting up everything, and I'm literally going, Carter, play this. Carter, play that. And from his memory, he can play anything he's ever heard. He's the most musical person I've ever met, right? And he's the reason why this worship sounds so good this morning, because it did sound good, I'm not gonna lie. And that cello is incredible. My brother, every Christmas, we get him a new musical instrument. He learns it in 30 minutes, comes back, and he's playing the accordion or he's playing the flute or whatever he's playing, right? The most musical guy in here. Do you think God anointed him for a reason? Of course he did. Of course God anointed him with a calling in mind. Of course that's the most obvious thing in the world. Of course he's a musician. And sometimes God's calling is just right in front of you. Oh, we just go, is that it? Sometimes it really is that simple. It really is right in front of you. Like, hey, man, you're a good speaker. Hey, man, you've memorized a lot of verses. Hey, man, you're an extrovert. My buddy Gervier comes to sessions on Tuesday nights. What an extrovert. Everybody knows Gervier. He's always joking around. He's got no social anxiety at all. Okay? Zero. You know what he does? He stands up on the bus. He stands up on the bus and he goes, hey, everybody, I got something to say. Jesus Christ is the Son of God. You got to believe it. He does that? Amazing. You think God has gifted him for that? Of course he has. Of course he has. Sometimes, can I just be honest? Sometimes it's real obvious. Sometimes it's right in front of you what you're supposed to do. God has given you this gifting. Spurgeon says this, I believe that every Christian who is converted to God has been prepared for it by a long course of providence and grace, that God has been working on him long before the day of his conversion. 2 Corinthians 1, Paul says, he that anoints you is God. He that anoints you is God. You have an anointing. You have a purpose. It's encouraging to know. And Andrew, his purpose is to go and get Simon Peter and tell him all about Jesus. He says, there we found the Messiah, that is the Christ. He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, you are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas. Okay, so there's only two men in all of history who have been called the Rock in two languages. One of them is Peter. His name is Petros. That means rock. The other one is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Now, they both have the same problem, which is what happens if you go to another country where they speak a different language? Do they just call you The Rock? Or like if you're showing WWE in Mexico, what do they call you? Do they call you The Rock or do they translate the word? Well, they translate the word, right? They call him La Roca. So Dwayne La Roca Johnson. And Peter has the same problem. So Jesus gives him this new name. Again, this is the first interaction he's ever had. Jesus gives him this new name, Kepha in Aramaic. Kepha means rock. Peter means rock in Greek. So it's annoying and confusing because Peter has like 4 names in the gospel. So it's Peter, Simon, Simon Peter, and Cephas. Those are all the same person, okay? So in the same way you got Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Dwayne La Roca Johnson, we have the same issue here. Why does Jesus, the first thing he does is change his name? Peter, he's doing pretty well for himself. You find out that he's married, which means he's probably the oldest of the disciples. When you read the Gospels, you notice that there's 4 fishermen, right? One of them's his brother, but he's got these other guys. And whenever he leaves his father Zebedee behind, you remember, Jesus calls him to leave his boats, and it says he left his father and the hired servants. So Peter, sometimes you say, well, the disciples were just fishermen, right? Humble fishermen. But Peter, he's actually got quite a bit going on for himself. He's got some hired servants. He's got 4 guys. He owns all these boats. The scripture says it was his boats. So he's got a bunch of boats. He's got some hired servants. He's got a lot going on. He's the oldest of all the disciples. He's married. He's established. And Jesus calls him to leave all of this. And the first thing he does is change his name. He doesn't explain it to him. He doesn't tell him what's going on. Later, we find out what his name means. So his first name, Simon. Simon is an ancient name. You go back 1,500 years. Do you remember Leah in Genesis 14? Leah has a sister who is much more beautiful than her. And Leah gets married, and she knows that her husband does not love her. And you get one of the saddest verses in the entire Bible. It says that God saw that Leah was not loved. God saw that Leah was not loved. She named her first son Reuben, which means, look, a son. In Hebrew, she named her second son Simon. Simon in Hebrew means God has heard. God has heard. God saw that Leah was not loved. Can we just stop there for a second? No one really knows you. No one really knows you the way that God knows. It struck me when I was 19. You think you're going to have all your high school friends forever, right? That's what everybody thinks. I'm going to have my high school friends forever. And then 6 months go by and you never talk to these fools. You do, forget about these guys. And you go and get your job at Starbucks, or you get your job at McDonald's, and you start working at, and you get into a different crowd. You have a different community, right? You only had those friends because you had to see them in high school, but then you leave them all behind, right? And I realized as I was very, very lonely and also heavy because I'd committed so much sin. And I just felt like, man, if people saw what I'm really like, if people saw the, the ego that I have sometimes, the arrogance, if people knew about the lies that I've told in the past, if people knew about the sin that I've committed, 100%, they would look at me differently. Like most people have something like that, right? Where you go back in your life and you go, yeah, most things I'm like an open book, but there's 1 or 2 things in my life that I just keep to myself for now. And even the people closest to you, maybe you're here and even things that you wouldn't even want to tell your parents. You wouldn't even want to tell your wife. You wouldn't even want to tell your husband. Things that you go, yeah, it's better that people don't know that. Why? Because even if somebody was really, really, really close to you, still, they probably look at you differently. I mean, if we're just being honest, we all got stuff like that where we think, yeah, I'll let you in pretty close. I'm an open book. I'm a friendly guy. You come get to know me. But I don't want to get too comfortable. I don't want to let my guard down too much. If I let my guard down too much, I might expose myself a little too much, and then you find out a little bit too much about me, and then you walk away. And maybe that's happened in the past. Maybe people have walked away. Maybe people have seen a certain part of you, and they go, you know what, man? I'm not that interested in what you're selling. God looks down at Leah. All we know about Leah is that she had a sister that was more beautiful. Her husband didn't love her. She's all on her own. And all it says is that God saw. God saw that she was not loved. You know, Reuben's name means, look, a son. But in Hebrew, it rhymes with the word, God sees my pain. God sees my pain. God is the only one who really knows you. In the times when I get down on my knees and I am intimate with the Lord, there's only one person that I can actually be really 100% honest with. And also, there's only one person who's seen everything I've ever done. Sometimes you can be under the illusion that, oh man, I'm going to be in trouble when God finds this out. He already found out. He already knew. He saw the future. He knew you were going to mess up. He knew you were going to commit that sin. And still, he loves you and he calls you before it makes any sense. Simon is given this name. God listens. God listens, Simon. And he changes it to Peter. Peter means rock or stone. But here's the thing, it's not going to be 3 years until Jesus starts explaining what his name means. Very interesting. He gives him a new name, a new identity. He says, leave your house and leave your wife and leave all your stuff behind. You're going to travel the world and preach the gospel. Peter was also crucified, but not on an X-shaped cross. He was crucified upside down. It says of Peter, Jesus turns to him and says, your name is Peter, and on this rock, again, Peter means rock, on this rock, I will build my church. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. And whatever you bind here will be bound, and whatever you loose here will be loosened. Later on in the Gospels, he says this, if you forgive a sin, it will be forgiven. And if you do not forgive, it will not be forgiven. Now, the Catholics and the Orthodox, they'll come along and they'll say, see, Peter was a priest. The priest has the authority to forgive sins. But of course, you remember when you read the gospel, Jesus, when he turns to that man who's on the ground and he can't walk, he says, son, your sins are forgiven you. And then the Pharisees, they turn to him and they say, what do they say? Who can forgive sins but God alone? Jesus says at the end of the gospel, everywhere you go, all of his followers, everywhere you go, you will announce the forgiveness of sins. And so part of our job, if I could just pause here, part of our job is not to say, hey man, I'm holier than thou. I've got this special authority and I'm declaring you forgiven. No, I'm a beggar. And I'm just going around. And the word for preach that Jesus uses when he says everywhere it will be preached about the forgiveness of sins, it doesn't mean preach. It means something more like to announce. Like if the king had an announcement, somebody would go and stand on the street corner and say, hey, good news, everybody. Good news. And what is the thing being announced? The forgiveness of sins. Everywhere we go, like Peter, we announce the forgiveness of sins. Man, that's good news. Because it's not me. Can you imagine that Georgian diplomat, right? The guy that represented the country of Georgia and then messes up so bad. Feels like a hypocrite. And can you imagine? Can you imagine if Georgia was the only country that had the cure for cancer? And now this Georgian diplomat is in a very weird situation where on the one hand, he really is a terrible representative. I mean, he really is, right? He really did mess up bad. He really is embarrassed about what he's done in the past. And at the same time, if he found out that his friend had cancer, there'd be a very specific attitude, wouldn't there? It'd be like, man, I'm an idiot. I've messed up. I've done a bad job at representing my country, right? But you got to go to Georgia. You got to go to Georgia. They got the cure. And the same is true of Christ. That if I genuinely think, man, this has saved me, this has helped me, all I can do is share it with people. I want to announce the forgiveness of sins. Why? Because I have been forgiven. I'm not some priest. I don't have some special authority. I'm like a man in a desert saying, man, I found water over there. It's not my water. I'm not the source of it. I'm not the one who discovered it, but there's a bunch of people over there. You got to go over there if you want water. That's what Jesus says to the woman at the well. I'll give you water that will cause you to never thirst. To never thirst. So Simon becomes Peter, the rock. Does Simon know what it means to be Peter, to be the rock? I mean, first of all, that's really weird. In Aramaic, that's not a name. Like Kepha is just the word for like it's weird. Jesus just goes, "You're the rock now," and it's like okay. And so that's why when they translate it, they don't translate it as a name. They translate it as a word. People just start calling him the rock, and Peter has no idea why. And he's not going to find out till the end of his life. As a matter of fact, even at the end of his life, when Jesus says, "On this rock I will build my church," Jesus is still being poetic. He's not going to find out what it means to be the foundation of the church for the rest of his life. We look back 2,000 years later and we go, Peter was that great preacher. Peter planted so many churches. The foundation of the entire church of Jesus Christ was built on what Peter did. He didn't know that. God prepares you for works that you're not going to understand in the moment, and it's not going to make sense. There was a man named Don Richardson. This man, he went to Papua New Guinea in the 1900s, and there were these people. They had a very strange mythology. Sometimes we underestimate just how different some of these tribal cultures can be. They believed that the greatest form of glory in the world was betrayal. They loved a good betrayal story. Maybe you like Netflix dramas or watching Love is Blind or something, and you wait for the moment when they see each other. They've been professing their love for each other. And then you see them, and then the girl or the guy has some look of disgust on their face, and it's just the ultimate betrayal, and you're there eating your popcorn like, oh, this is so juicy and dramatic. So these people, they were just obsessed with betrayal, the idea of betrayal. And not just that, they deified it. They said, the gods betray each other all the time because this is the highest. It shows that you outsmarted the other person. So this man, Tom Richardson, he goes to these people. He shares with them the gospel story. And you know what they start doing? They start worshiping Judas. They say, Judas, man, what a smart guy. He figured it out. He got one over on Jesus. You remember Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss, right? Judas was one of Jesus' 12 disciples. He betrays Jesus with a kiss. He hands him over to the Romans, and that's what causes Jesus to be crucified. Judas, his friend, betrays him. These people start worshiping Judas. Man, they start worshiping Judas for a while. Can you imagine how bad this preacher felt? Can you imagine how much of a failure it would feel like to be on an island full of people and you're coming there and you're like, oh, I'm going to preach them the story of Jesus. And they all start worshiping Judas, right? That's crazy. It wasn't until later there was a war that broke out. They had another tradition. If there was a war, you could offer something called a peace child. One tribal leader, the father of the whole tribe, the elder, would offer a newborn child, a son, to the other tribe. And the other tribe would raise that son. He would live among strangers. He would become one of them. And wherever that peace child was, there would be no war. If the child died, there would be chaos again. There would be war. But as long as that child lived, there was peace. And it wasn't until the war broke out that they put two and two together, that they said, Christ, the elders figured it out, said, Christ is the peace child. He was sent. We were at war with God because of our sin. And wherever the peace child is, there we are not at war. Hundreds of thousands came to Christ. So you see, God prepares people. God prepares you. God prepares me. Not only for the work that we do, but He prepares the people that are going to hear it. I trust that God prepared your heart to hear this sermon today. I pray every morning on Sunday, I get down on my knees and I pray that God would prepare. I was praying with my wife last night on my knees, just praying that God would prepare people's hearts for what would be preached. And can I just say, If God has put it on your heart over the last week, you got to start that Bible study. You got to share the gospel with your aunt. You got to share the gospel with that person. Do it. Of course, there's always fear of rejection. But Jesus, he had very harsh words. He said, if anyone is ashamed of me, I will be ashamed of him. If anyone is ashamed of me, I will be ashamed of him. Do not be ashamed of Christ. If he saves you, can you imagine being ashamed of the one who saved you, the one who redeems you? So we share the gospel and we preach. Why? Not because we've got it figured out, not because I got some special authority or because I'm some prophet, some priest, some king. He's the anointed one. He's the Messiah. He's the peace child. Me, I'm just a waiter. It's like, it's a weird thing we do at restaurants, right? Where if the food is good, we tip the waiter. We should tip the cook, shouldn't we? I mean, he made the food, right? He made the food. I'm just delivering it. And you're not the cook. Let him cook. You're the waiter. You're just delivering something that he has already done. And so let God do the evangelism. Let God do the preparing of people's hearts. Let God show you what your calling is, that anointing, whether it's Carter playing cello this morning and making the worship beautiful that God anointed him for, or whatever it is that God has anointed you for, do it. Michelle felt called to start this food drive. God anointed her for that. Amazing. Let her do it. But if God has anointed you for something, can I be honest? My vision for us is not that we're a church where from the top down, we got to organize people and tell people, hey, you start a men's group, or you start taking people out for coffee, or you make sure you text people, send them voice memos, pray for them. It would be so much better if it came from us. It would be so much better if every member of the body, like it says from Paul, he says, each one of us are members of the body. If every member of the body played a unique role. So let's pray.